So, hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of In Conversation With. My name is John Lunn, aka Jonnychipz, and in this video series, we talk all things cloud with experts and advocates from right across the industry, covering a wide range of topics from skills and careers through to technical overviews, soft skills, and all that good stuff. So, whether you're watching this on YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, or LinkedIn, thanks so much for tuning in. It really does mean a lot. Please do take part in the chat below. Drop us a line, drop us a comment. Please do like and subscribe to the channel. That would be awesome. Okay, so on today's episode, I'm thrilled to be joined by such a huge advocate of learning in the cloud community. He's a part of the core team at the 100 Days of Cloud. He's an AWS community hero, and he's a CEO of ExamPro. So based in Ontario, Canada, I'm thrilled to welcome my next guest on In Conversation With as Mr. Andrew Brown. Hey, Andrew, how's it going? Welcome to the show.
Hey, John, thanks for having me. Hopefully it's not too late where you are, but it's still early days here. We still have light.
We still got a bit of a time difference, haven't we, between the two continents? No, it's it's nice and dark over in the UK. We just had our daylight savings, but how's things with you anyway, Andrew? All good?
Well, over here in Toronto, we don't have snow just yet, but it's any day now we could be covered in it, and it'll look like my background here. So
nice, gearing up for the festive season. Then always good to build a snowman.
Oh yeah, we've had our tree up since November 1st, right? So we're ready for the Christmas time. So.
Well, when this video goes out, it will be December. But yeah, don't get me started. You'll have me singing Christmas songs now. I'm one of those, Andrew. So we best move on pretty sharpish, I reckon. But look, Andrew, it's such a pleasure to have you on the show. I first noticed you when I got involved with the 100 Days of Cloud Challenge back last summer. So back in 2020, kind of as we went into that lockdown period. And, the stuff that you kind of provided with the core team there over 100 Days of Cloud really, made me notice what you were up to in the community. And it was, you have helped me a lot, kind of progress my own career, which is, great to kind of have you on the show and have a bit of a chat with you around that and all the other cool stuff. But look, before we get into it, I don't know if you want to give yourself a little bit of a better introduction, let us know what you're up to, what your background is and what's going on.
Great, cool. For everyone that is just tuning in here, I'm Andrew Brown. I'm from Toronto, Canada. And so I run a company called ExamPro, which produces free cloud certification courses. How we make revenue, I could not tell you, but I can tell you that, if you are trying to find certification in AWS, Azure, GCP, Terraform, Kubernetes, things like that, I'm always producing free courses for you to learn up on. And I don't know how much else there is to add there, but yeah.
No, and it's cool, and and that's the whole thing. And you're doing this, and it's all free courses at the end of the day. Everything that you're putting out at the moment is all across YouTube, across the ExamPro website, and all that good stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. It's awesome. So, I mean, maybe we'll start off, Andrew, just a bit about your background. I mean, can you let us know kind of how did you find yourself in this space? How did your career path, whatever that may have been, go down that wind and twisty world and end up to where you are at the moment?
Sure. I mean, I have a long background in cloud because my mother owned a computer store, and so I was fixing computers and teaching people how to use computers very early on, and so it was a natural transition for me. So after the computer repair business, I got into websites. This is back in the day when it was like everyone built their websites in front page. And so from building websites, and I didn't like building websites. I wanted to make video games or something more fun or creative, but it paid well, and I paid that to go to college, community college, not university, to go learn how to do video production and all these kind of like media production things. And then out of there, I really wanted to do web application development, and so I had worked for a little company in my hometown. And they wouldn't let me use the newest, hottest thing called Ruby on Rails. And so I decided that I really wanted to go work for a startup. And so, for 2 years, I lived out of my grandma's house. And eventually a company decided to hire me as a CTO. Like I never had a junior or senior role. It was just like 2-3 years of sweating. And
Nice.
I got hired, and I ended up going over to Spain, and I worked there. And then I came back, and I worked a bunch of different startups, had my own firm, and then I just decided to go back to my roots, which is edtech. And that's how we got here today. For cloud, I've only been using cloud for 5 years. I mean, I've been using AWS since like 2011. And it wasn't my choice. And the reason I got into more in the cloud was because I was trying to build a video game, and I was trying to see every time somebody mentioned a particular type of game on Twitter. And so I needed a server or some way to store value. And so I spun up a resource on AWS. And I did not realize that it did not have a sane default. And at the end of the month, I had a bill that was like 3,000 USD dollars. And when you convert that over to Canadian, that's like 100 million Canadian. And so, and so I was so mad. I was just like, and I wasn't mad the fact that I was overbilled, but the mad that I just felt that I had this blind spot that I said, I hated AWS, so I'm going to go learn it inside and out. And now this is where I am now. So, yeah.
Well, that's an awesome backstory, to be honest, Andrew. You know, just to show that, like you say, you know, to kind of go from that kind of humble beginnings of fixing PCs and, you know, working in a repair shop, working into, you know, doing some websites, and then, you know, finding yourself a CTO of a company is quite a career jump. I think some must, you know, would probably say, which is cool, and you know, and it's clearly serving you well at the moment. So I mean, in terms of, like you say, you've got your backstory as to why you started to learn AWS inside and out was purely because, you know, the fact that you kind of had that blind spot and got charged an arm and a leg for stuff that you had left running, or that you were consuming, whatever it is, which, you know, is probably a story, one of those horror stories that most businesses today have probably been through at some stage, you know, without putting in appropriate cost management functionality. But I mean, where did you go from that then, Andrew, in terms of learning everything that there was to know, or as best that you can from an AWS perspective? What made you turn to community and start putting that knowledge back out there?
I mean, I've always been really community focused, and I think this has to just do with my family involvement. So my grandfather was very involved in the local community. I'm originally from Thunder Bay, which is a northern community. And so he was very involved. And so every single weekend of my life, I was doing volunteer work, right? I had two options. I either could go volunteer doing the volunteer sports, the volunteer bingo, the volunteer what have you, or I was going out to camp chopping firewood. Okay. So I didn't want to go out in the bush. So I decided to do the volunteer work. And so basically it just became kind of a normal thing where you just volunteer your time and you do things for free. Right. And so, you know, for me, it was just when I was making cloud content, I could have charged, but I just thought, well, why would I do that when I could just give it away? And the reason I got into producing cloud content was because, you know, I was a CTO and developer for many years. And for a long time, I never needed a resume. I would just say, go look at the company I built before, look at these apps that I produced, or I would just build a sample really quickly for a company or startup that was trying to build something and say, here it is. But what happened was there was some kind of shift where people did not trust my skill set, even though I could prove it. And I think it just came with the large influx of new developers in the market that, you know, these boot camps are spinning up and everyone was saying they're a full stack developer who could do the work. And so companies did not know what was what anymore. And so they started relying really heavily on what was a resume and those formal pipelines. And so I said, okay, well, maybe this is not the space I should be in anymore. You know, with that overbilling experience, I thought, okay, maybe there's something here with cloud and it's time to bite the bullet and learn it. And so, you know, it was either that or I'd have to learn how to do comp sci, right? Because in Toronto, it's a very competitive market. All the people are coming out of Waterloo and they're comp sci grads, and they can do algorithms to no end, where I still can't do them. I can't do recursive off the top of my head, and it's been like 20 years. And so I said, well, if I can't compete with them, I don't have the comp sci degree, which apparently people seem to care about all of a sudden now, then maybe I can go learn cloud and get certifications. And I think at the time, I was actually taking A Cloud Guru. And so I was doing A Cloud Guru. And, you know, I just, when I got to the pros, I couldn't really learn what their resources. And so at that point, I just decided to kind of start making my own. And it wasn't I was trying to make a company, but I was just trying to build my own platform for me to learn on my own. So like one thing was to enter in my own practice exams and do flashcards for memorization. And, you know, I started just sharing some of those resources online, and people said, well, where can I get these resources? So I just gave them access to my platform, and it just kind of got out of hand. So
No.
it
Well,
wasn't
it's
intentional, right?
well, yeah, I get that. I get that because I think it's certainly the last few years. Especially since lockdown. I think obviously with the explosion of cloud, the fact that everybody's working from home, lots of cloud services have had to be spun up really quickly. So I think we've got this perfect storm almost. In some respects that businesses have had to kind of start using cloud technologies probably far sooner than they would have been comfortable with, because of the COVID situation, which I guess it's got that knock-on effect. Then you've got a whole bunch of IT pros, developers, all of a sudden going, "Whoa, hang on a second, I'm not comfortable with that just yet." So these resources now, I'm guessing, have kind of, I'm guessing because they're free. You've probably seen a very sharp incline of the use of those resources then over the last sort of 2 years. Would I be right in saying that?
Oh, there was an explosion during COVID, and particularly with Azure. And it was well timed for me because that's when I started doing Azure certification courses. And I
Hmm.
think it was basically necessary because when you take your a company and you make them work from home, now companies are concerned about how do we monitor our or maybe not necessarily monitor them, but how do we ensure that our employees are working in a secure manner, right? They're not leaking out secrets. They're not going to get rootkits on their machines, things like that. And so that's where the zero trust model became extremely popular. And if you talk to before COVID, if you had mentioned the zero trust model to security experts or thought leaders, they would just say, that's not really anything. It's just whatever. And now it's
Yeah.
really central. And so, who has a really good zero trust model is Azure with the Active Directory, right? It makes it really easy to do risk-based policy, something.
Yeah,
So,
conditional access policies. Yeah, so you
mhm.
can base them on risk, where or user location, those kind of things. And you're right. I think, those kind of all those other new technologies, certainly around security, identity management, seem to have, played straight to the forefront because everybody effectively has been working from home, for the last 18 months, 2 years. So I mean, just to keep to the theme of you building these courses and where you've got to now with getting them out there, clearly, you just alluded to, you started off with AWS, you moved into Azure over the last, couple of years, or in terms of writing course material and things like that. You've got GCP. I know you're doing stuff with Oracle, Terraform, and some other peripheral technologies as well. I mean, have you got any good insights on that one, Andrew, in terms of, I think from a technical point of view, there's always this argument that seems to be thrown around of multi-cloud versus single cloud. As a technologist, should I be a breadth across multi-cloud? Should I stay with one cloud? And look, I know there's no one right answer or one wrong answer there, but I mean, what's your take on that? From a personal observation perspective.
I think that a lot of companies are using more than one cloud, and so whether you want to or not, you're going to need need to know more than one provider. Especially you look at what your primary workload. A lot of people run on AWS, but a lot of companies run their secondary workload on Azure, right? Because they need a way of managing their identities and things like that. So when I started out, I was really believing that just only AWS. That's all. And not necessarily just only AWS, but you pick your provider and there you are. It has everything that you need.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
and and that's something that, but especially on the AWS side, they really sell you on that because they are the lead in the cloud service provider space, and they don't want you doing multi-cloud. I don't know if
Okay.
they're more open to it now or less about it, but there's a point where it's you had vendors at conferences and they're not allowed to mention any other to the fact that they are multi-cloud. Well, that was the selling point on them. You look at Azure and GCP, and they're highly promoting multi-cloud because they're trying to get a segment of AWS's audience, which makes sense.
Yeah.
And so obviously there's that bent to it. But from a practical perspective, just going across the cloud for whatever reason, I didn't realize how much I was missing out, especially at the fundamentals level, because I did the certified cloud practitioner, the Oracle, they call it the Oracle Associate, even though it's fundamentals, the
Hmm.
Google Cloud Digital Leader, the AZ 900. I haven't released it yet out, but the CompTIA Essentials Plus, those levels there. And what's interesting is they all kind of cover the same thing, but they all have things that they uniquely cover. And the thing is that if you were to go across them, you'd say, oh, wow, there's really there's this puzzle piece with these pieces that are missing.
Yeah.
and you wouldn't
Okay.
know if you went across it. And so, like right now, I'm going to be releasing my certified cloud practitioner. And I've collected everything from the other ones I've learned back and packed it back into this. Going like, why doesn't AWS ever talk about the zero trust model or make it part of their fundamental thing? Or why don't they talk about digital transformation and like the evolution of like how compute has evolved, or more about identity and things like that. And that is something that I think is very interesting, where like for instance, I never knew what CAPEX and OPEX was until I went over to Azure. Like now
Right.
AWS
Okay.
before, but like the only thing that AWS ever talked about was like TCO, total
Yeah.
cost of ownership, right? And then when I went over to Azure, they're like CAPEX and OPEX. I'm like, oh, what are these, right?
Yeah.
And so there's just like missing pieces, and you wouldn't know. And so I think that not necessarily you have to go across all the clouds, but there is like one complete view, and the only way you're gonna get it is go across it, or unless somebody makes their own cloud fundamentals course that covers it all.
Well, there we
So
go.
if
Yeah. Little
somebody
light
did
bulb
that,
moment.
then hey, right? Sorry.
Well, it's really interesting you say that. I mean, as you're talking there, Andrew, I mean, in my mind, obviously, I've got opinions as much as the next person's got opinions, and it's one of those things. I think you can see that there's probably two ways of looking at it. As a technologist or a technical person, whether you're, in the dev side or an IT pro, an operational kind of IT person, you're probably going to want to get as much breadth in technology as you can possibly squeeze into your head, I guess.
Yeah.
If you're a technologist, you probably want to cram as much in before you start having things that fall out because you either don't practice them on a daily basis or you just forget. But then I guess from a business perspective, like you say there, it's this, because for a while in my head, rightly or wrongly, I had this term, it's a marketing thing. It's a marketing thing, this multi-cloud term. And I think Microsoft have hit the nail on the head now, to be honest, they seem to be pushing a lot of hybrid technology. You look at the release of some of their, Azure Arc, for argument's sake, is that connecting to multiple clouds or on-prem equipment? So yeah, it's I didn't realize that AWS are they kind of spinning that message at the moment themselves, or is it
Well, they're
still
big into
all about?
well, they're big into hybrid cloud and edge
Yeah.
computing, and they technically do multi-cloud as long as it's someone they're partnered with. So like
Yeah, sure.
Terraform makes products, and they're all about multi-cloud, right? It's like I learn how to write Terraform infrastructure as code, and I can kind of translate that over to the other cloud providers. And so since they have a official partnership, in that sense, AWS is fulfilling their multi-cloud kind of promise, but they're not saying, hey, go work with Azure, right? They're just saying like, hey, we work adjacent to this thing, which can work with other cloud service providers without a name in mention there, right?
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
But one thought like I had was the fact that and just coming back to doing because I go in rounds, right? I'm doing AWS, then I'm dumping all my knowledge and going over to Azure, then I'm dumping all my knowledge and going over to GCP. And the thing is like I was going back to I haven't released it yet, but I have an ML course, the AWS machine learning specialty. I have it all prepped, I just haven't recorded it yet. And I'm going back, I'm like, I don't remember all this stuff. I had like slides and everything, like very detailed. And I'm going, I don't remember any of this stuff, but I know that I can do it because, one of my other companies that's a ed tech company, the reason I made that course, because they said, hey, we want to set up an ML pipeline. And I'm like, well, I guess I can make my ML course. And so I know I can do it, but I can't remember all the knobs and dials. And the question is it really valuable to go deep and know all those knobs and dials and keep them in your memory? Or is it better to get that breadth of knowledge and having that confidence? So you're like, okay, I don't remember all the details of this, but I know I have confidence I can do it. Like, I don't remember how to set up a scale set, but if I came back to it, I know I could do it, right?
Yeah.
And I have a general idea how long it would take me, even though I can't remember all the little, if you quiz me, I wouldn't know it, right? And to me, I think that's
I know what you mean.
valuable. Sorry?
No, I completely understand what you mean, and that's a cool way of looking at it. Like you said earlier, it would almost be cool if there was that, almost CompTIA kind of third party view of an agnostic view of the cloud platforms, and maybe in the coursework, look at how does Azure relate to GCP, relate to AWS, and maybe have a slant if you're going to work in a particular technology area or a cloud vendor. Have that appreciation. That would be a cool sort of set. No doubt a minefield to try and keep up to date, but certainly where we are today. I mean, so AWS, Azure, GCP, they're the kind of three cloud providers, and you mentioned Oracle there as well. I mean, do What's your gut feel at the moment? Are you seeing more uptake of one type of courseware over another, Andrew?
Well, I mean, the certifications does not reflect necessarily what the industry demands, but like what like people that want to get certified want. And so Azure like does three times of what AWS does, right? And
Wow.
then
Okay.
for some odd reason for GCP, they have like a couple like hit courses like the professional and their data engineer course. And
Hmm.
so it's just what it is. So like the reason why GCP is like that is because everybody that's looking at their ML, AI, data workloads, they're always thinking about GCP. A lot of people are thinking AWS is their primary workloads, and I don't know why Azure has such an uptick. I mean, they've been in the game for such a long time, Microsoft. So,
Yeah.
and they're really good at using it as a marketing arm to bring people in the door, right? Like Microsoft Learn is amazing. They run webinars, and half the time, if you take a webinar, they'll let you get certified for free.
Hmm.
But I also think that there could be a component of complexity with Azure because it is darn hard to learn. If you're already like knee deep in it, you might not see it that way, but like everything is a little bit more complex. So like their infrastructure, right? Like domain faults and domain updates. I can't remember if it's called domain updates,
Fault
but
domains, update
fault domains.
domains. Yeah.
I got it
Yeah.
backwards, but like the concepts aren't there in the other providers because they just abstract them away. And so you go and you say, well, why is that complexity there? Is it because it gives you more control? Is it because of legacy reasons? But no matter the reason why it's there, but Azure, they always meet the business use case, right? So yeah, it might be a bit of a sprawling mess, but the idea is that they can always put it on paper and say, yeah, we can meet that requirements. That's very
Yeah.
apparent with like Azure App Services, which is the competitor to AWS Elastic Beanstalk, where it's like they have like HPC workloads for that. You know what I mean? Like
Sure.
you want to
Sure.
manage platform as a service, you want to be HPC, here you go. You go into their API and they'll have like features that aren't even out and they'll say coming soon. Like
Yeah.
it's just Azure really, they really understand how to communicate with businesses and meet their needs on that part. Where AWS is kind of like, we have a bunch of Legos, go figure it out. You know what I mean?
With you, yeah. No, and you know, I've heard somebody mention it or talk about it in that way. That I think if you're a techie, it's great because you're down in the weeds doing stuff. And I think just using your example there of fault domains and update domains, coming at it from from a Microsoft viewpoint, you're right. You probably don't recognize that there are those added complexities. But then, the questions are, okay, so do the other cloud providers abstract that away, or do they have those features and functionality? Because look, even fault domains and update domains, they're not available in every geo. They're not available in every data center globally from an Azure point of view. So it's just about that whole thing. And I saw a great presentation of the Microsoft data centers. There's a great, if you ever get a chance to go on and do the virtual Azure data center tour, take it. It's probably one of the best presentations I've ever been witness to. It's really good. But they talk about the whole structure of their data centers, and that plays through into the products. Things like fault domains is literally, you can see 4 halls of each data center, and how they're pieced together, and you can kind of, if you watch that, you can relate to sometimes how you're building things in. You know exactly which hall almost your piece of infra or whatever it is that you spin up is going to be sat in. So it's it's those kind of things, I guess. How does that compare across the other cloud
Well,
providers? Have you got any insights in those
well, I
things?
mean, like, well, and again, coming back at the fun, and I keep on saying fundamentals is the most important. I know some competitors of mine, they'll say skip the fundamentals, go, and because they're thinking from a developer perspective. They're thinking like, oh, you took this really easy exam, it didn't provide you a lot of value. But the whole point of these is to provide like a bird's eye view. These fundamentals, like my background, it's like being able to see the landscape at a view to be able to plan and stuff like that. And so one thing that you learn if you go across the fundamentals is like AWS doesn't have something called assured workloads like GCP has, or Azure has this as well, where they have a guarantee of data sovereignty. And so it's not like you can't do it on AWS, but the idea is the fact that like their approach to data sovereignty is like, you use the service, make sure it stays there, right? Like if you launch something in the region, that's where it is. Where you go to GCP and they're like, it's like, yes, you launch something, it's there. However, we have this feature called assured workloads, and it's going to ensure that things stay there, right? So like for whatever reason, a developer doesn't come in and move it somewhere else, right? Or Azure says like, if we replicate it, it's going to go to another another data center that because there's paired regions, right? And so it's going to go somewhere that's going to keep your data sovereignty if that matters to you. And so, if you're like a government organization or somebody that's working with that, it makes a lot more sense on Azure and GCP. But you wouldn't know that if you didn't go across the cloud. Or for another thing is like AWS and Azure have something called GovCloud, and GovCloud is specific to the US. It works with a bunch of I'm just saying this for our audience here. I'm sure you know of it,
Yeah,
but
no, absolutely, yeah.
Compliance programs like FedRAMP and all these other kind of regulatory compliance things. And you go over to GCP and you say, oh, where's GovCloud? Are they missing it? And they don't have one because the way they architected everything from day one was they said, instead of making an isolate data center that's specifically for running workloads, they figured out a way to be able to just make their current data center so secure that you can just run it in any kind of you can run different levels of security workloads in their existing zones, right? And so that is really great for governments that are trying to use it, because they're going to get the best in breed of services, and it's not like this separate experience, right? But you'd only know that if you went across the cloud, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think just to touch on things like that, the fact that Gov have got their own kind of instance, if you like, of Azure that they can use that's completely separate. There's certain geos across the world that have their own ringed off, cordoned off areas. And to take that a stage further, one of the cool things that again, bringing it back to that hybrid cloud kind of conversation at the moment is certainly from an Azure point of view, is the Stack range of products. I don't know if you've come across that or if you've started to look at that from a training perspective, because I think, I don't know if are you familiar with the Stack Edge and the Stack Hub range of products from Azure?
I can't keep up with it.
It's almost like bringing that
Serverless 360 I just found out about, right? Like they just keep bringing more. They have the most,
yeah,
right?
Yeah. Do you know that we'll get to those questions in a minute, but I mean, just to finish off the point around the Stack range, it's almost like you're bringing a piece of cloud to your on-prem environment, effectively, being able to use that control plane, so that Azure familiar control plane, ARM templates, PowerShell, Terraform, whatever it may be, to spin up your infrastructure, but against your own provisioned hardware sat in your own private data center, which is quite a cool way of looking at it and stitching it all together using all the the hybrid technologies like Azure Arc and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, so coming back to kind of the cloud kind of training materials that you're putting together at the moment, I mean, in terms of where you think things are going, I mean, are there any kind of insights that you're getting from those users? Because obviously, we touched on 100 Days of Cloud. You've got a lot of influx of people coming in and learning around AWS, Azure, and GCP. Are you getting a flavor for any feedback from that community at the moment, Andrew, as to where there's any gaps or where there's kind of things that don't sit right in the kind of the certification process?
Well, there's gaps in what the certifications teach you, and then there's gaps where there just are no certifications in particular topics, right? So when we talk about what is missing, a lot of times it's adjoining to other clouds, right? So again, if you're in the AWS space, they're not going to be teaching you about Active Directory and identity management, things like that. They're starting to incorporate things like single sign-on, and there are ways to bridge that stuff, but they don't make it core. They don't teach you any of that, right? So there's things like that. Or if you're in the Azure space and you're doing certifications there, it's very Windows heavy. And so if you're running Linux workloads, I do feel that that's kind of lacking there as well. So that could be problematic. AWS's approach to exams is it's more story driven, whereas like when you go into the Azure space, they're really like, can you prove that you know how to use a service, right? And they do have like what are they called? Their case studies. And so I wouldn't say that that's totally untrue, but I would just say the most of it is like, do you know how to spin the knobs and dials in Azure, where AWS is more conceptual, right? And then when you go over to the GCP space, it's less about like conceptual architecting and more about like vision and thought. Like every time I think of GCP, I think of like Elysium or like this Sky City, future Sky City, because they really try to change the way you think, right? And that's like how the three operate and how they think. But we are starting to see a bit of convergence. So I think that a lot of people were complaining about. They're just saying like the certified cloud practitioner was too easy. And so recently AWS has reworked it. And so then they're starting to do kind of what Azure does, where they're starting to say like, okay, maybe we got to move it to be more practical because the industry wants that, because they feel that the certification might not be the same kind of value, right? And then you see that extremely in the digital leader, where their certifications were always really easy, and so they when the digital cloud digital leader came out, they said, okay, we're going to make it the hardest fundamentals. You know what I mean?
Right.
To like compensate for that kind of stuff. So that's really interesting. But in terms of what's missing in the certification space, and this is what I really want to be doing, because I don't want to be making courses that already exist, where we already have really good content creators already covering those grounds. I want to be making courses like a serverless certification course, which doesn't exist, which is super valuable, right? Or right now I'm working on a micro certification course on Gitpod. So something that, or Gitpod, I don't think there's an S in the proper title. And so, you know, that's something that is fundamental. It's like having this developer environment in the cloud, and how that affects your, like, it changes the way developer environments work. And those are something that's really important. I wouldn't say that the community is saying like, I want the certification. More so I'm saying, I think you should have the certification because it's important, right? Or things that, you know, companies don't think about, like GreenOps, right? Like, how do we work as sustainability, or even like at a fundamentals level, like how do we think about this? Because everybody is thinking about this for the next 10 to 30 years. So I don't know, there's just gaps, right? Or like containers, there's Kubernetes, but where's the container certification, right? How do you use Podman, and how do you use Docker, and how do you use in combination with managed services, right?
No, I agree. I think, you know, there's such an influx of knowledge that you kind of feel that you need to have. I've spoken about this with quite a few guests before, because there's this instant kind of fear of missing out. There's a new fandangled piece of technology that, you know, oh, it's new, everybody's going on about it, you've got to rush out and learn it now. And then you learn it and think, okay, I can see its use, but actually I do this in my day job, right? So, you know, trying to actually fit what you need to learn to actually do what you need to do, I suppose is fundamental, is my take on that. You know, don't just rush out and learn the new technology just because, which I'm so guilty of. You know, something new comes out, it's like, oh, I've got to read about that and see what it is. But it's just too much, you know, it's just far too much. But I think, just to pick you up on some of those points there, and I love the way that you kind of describe the cultures, the business cultures, because I've not done a huge amount with GCP, but as soon as you said, you know, you see this like this future Sky City type thing, I got the same vibes. I've watched a few of their kind of intro courses because, you know, as a technologist, somebody that works technically in the industry, I am absolutely looking to kind of branch out personally across the other cloud vendors. So, I mean, it's quite cool that you can describe those vendors in those kind of ways. So, I mean, so taking that on then, I mean, you mentioned there, which I thought was a cool term, GreenOps, you know, for sustainability. And you're right, it's one of those phrases that is paramount, you know, across globally at the moment. I mean, what are your thoughts on that then, Andrew? What are you thinking of in terms of sustainability? Where do you think we should be going with that?
Well, I think it's paramount for the next like 20, 30 years, because our goal is 2050 to get that get our planet to a particular temperature to fight back the curve. And when you go out and you say, okay, what can I do? Like, as a technologist, it's really hard to find anything that is like cohesively put together. You have a lot of people teaching at the most beginner level. It's like the Al Gore talk over and over again by different people. And you're going, okay, great, I get it. There's CO2 emissions, there's methane gases, there's this stuff like this, but how do I start applying it? And that is the thing that I think is extremely missing, where we don't have anybody just saying like, okay, even if it's not accurate or true of the actual role that could exist, like, let's define what a GreenOps engineer is. Let's create a roadmap of things that would be important to learn and set out to do that, right? So, you know, like, if you went out and did that, would you even know where to start? Like, what's going to make the biggest impact, right? Is it me, having less food waste, right? Or is it, you know, we have to stop these coal factories in China, and so now it's like a political thing. And so, like, as a technologist, are we trying to figure out how to work the political wheel better, or are there these things that are like less tech, like more on the edge? Like, you see, I'm here in the tundra, which can act as a very good carbon sink, right? And so you might think, well, trees are really important to that aspect, right? Because trees emit oxygen, right? And they probably hold carbon in their wood, and they fall over, and that's not necessarily always effective. Whereas, like, okay, if you have a tree that falls over, and it's decomposing, I believe that it's going to release emissions. So like where you have grass, where you have grass that grows this tall and it doesn't have time to decompose, and the next layer of grass grows on top of it, it's going to sequester that into the tundra. And so you go, oh, maybe tundra is not a bad idea after all to invest into.
Sure.
How do we do that? And so you go, okay, well, maybe we got to bring a bunch of animals here to keep the trees from growing, to making sure that this works really well. And then you think, okay, now what's the technology layer around that to grow that more? Or it's like sustainable houses, right? Like, like what goes into a house so that you are using less, like less water, less energy, and things like that. But there's no like a picture of that, right?
Oh no, absolutely, and I couldn't echo your thoughts, more loudly. I think you're right in terms of we all need to be more mindful of our own use of energy, and I think one of the things I spotted, in particular, Microsoft were doing around that kind of sustainability. I know you can go in, so if you're spinning up resources in Azure, there's a website you can go to, which is your sustainability calculator, and it will tell you exactly what your carbon footprint is for the resources that you've got running in a subscription, which I thought was quite a cool thing, especially if you're a global business with quite a lot of infra and whatever it may be in the cloud. You can literally have a view of how much carbon offset your business probably needs to think about. And even down to the data centers. I remember back to that talk about the data centers and Microsoft, how they do them. One of the cool things was, and I believe it's in the Dublin data center over in Ireland, they've planted all flower beds on the roof of the data centers. I know they sort of Gen 8, Gen 9 data centers now are getting so eco friendly and kind of negative carbon impact, that kind of stuff. But these flower beds, people are asking, what is that for kind of decoration? It's like, well, no, it's to attract bees and insects and to kind of pollinate the fields around those areas. So it's not like, I guess, some of these businesses aren't thinking about these approaches. And like you say, then how do we as technologists use the technology to move that into, I love that term in terms of GreenOps, it's put it front and center and start talking about it, eh?
Well, it could be developing edge computing, edge devices, IoT stuff. It could be just analyzing data and crossing those domains with things that necessarily weren't there. Like, it's like, can we reduce the amount of people on the streets or like in cars and things like that? So, but that's the thing is right now we're just in a questions phase, which is really frustrating because we really should be in a let's go do something phase. But I think if somebody made a course, if somebody made a GreenOps course, and people went through that, then maybe we could discover some opportunities to start tackling these things. But that's the most frustrating part is people don't know what to do. And then you have like Web3 where people go, okay, we don't know what to do there, but we know we'll make money. And everyone's like fighting over each other to try to get in. Like my one of my buddies there on Twitter, they had bought a .eth domain, an Ethereum domain. And then they talked about like they're dropping money. So if you bought a domain like months ago, whatever, now you'll get like $5,000 worth of some kind of token. Is it a governance token? Is it a utility token? I don't know what it is. And then you feel like, oh, well, I should have bought that, but I didn't buy it because it had gas, because you have to pay that additional gas fee. But I'm like, do I pay my groceries or do I gamble on this thing so that I can get money? And then no one's thinking about the greenhouse gases. You know what I mean? They're just thinking about the Web 3.0 gases, right? So that's kind of frustrating, but maybe there's a way to bring those two together, right?
It's such a I mean, I don't know about you, Andrew, but it is such a strange time, I guess, for everybody at the moment. You see these announcements from the likes of Facebook changing to Meta. Microsoft only a few weeks ago talking at Ignite around the mesh and bringing that kind of virtual and augmented reality to our homes. And you sit back and you think, I can see how we're getting there and know how we're going there. And then you bring crypto and things like I forget what the main crypto universe is called now. There's so many of these little tokens popping up that you can make billions off overnight, at the moment. But you're right. It's that fear of missing out again, isn't it? Is that crypto is kicking off Ethereum and obviously the blockchain to kind of buy digital assets and use them in this mesh world and mesh universe that we're potentially going to be living in fairly soon. I'll probably watch this video back in a couple of years' time and think, wow, how wrong was I? But I mean, what's your take on all of that?
Well, we're sitting at a crossroads, and we can decide which direction we want to go. And you see, like, it's like player one, where affordable housing, like we have an affordable housing crisis, and like I don't even have a house. It's hard, and it's like where you can barely afford to have a house, and then the planet's going to get worse, and people are going to be like, well, where can I actually have some value, where I have an environment that I like, and then I have a currency where I can actually purchase things, and people go, well, maybe if Facebook or somebody made a metaverse, then I can live in that world, which to me is like, would be really sad if that is where people are, where the world is such a poor shape, that's where they want to go. Or we can go the other direction where we say, okay, instead of Facebook owning the metaverse, when by the way, it's not necessarily metaverse. I think somebody said it's basically like the Google Play Store in VR. But like, so the idea is like, we can go the other direction, and, we can take control of that if everybody is well organized and things like that, or we can start consuming less and trying to change the way people are. But how to kind of shift it to the right direction is very hard. Like, how do you do that? I don't know. But the point is that you just have to be out there and doing it and saying, hey, I'm trying to do these things. And if you consistently say that, then more people will show up at the door and want to join your rallying point there, right? So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's certainly going to be an interesting time. But yeah, I again, just to echo your thoughts there, it certainly does feel very futuristic and very film-like. Like we've all seen at least half a dozen films that are kind of depicting our future. And I think I tweeted about, are we going to enter this dystopian future that we wish we'd never entered fairly soon? And it just feels very, very, very real and very close to us. And in some respects, I make myself laugh when I say things like that, because full well, like you just said, it sounds like this grandiose thing, but when we get there, it'll probably be really pixelated, bad avatars, running around this little area in virtual reality. But I think we all know where that is going to build up from, and I suppose those people that get in on the ground floor, which is why this Ethereum kind of contract NFT digital asset thing is going on at the moment, is probably taking us. We'll all own our digital estate within this mesh universe. Which
it's hard to say. It's either going to be very going to be core to it, or it's just going to be another type of database, right? Another type of database that has very expensive ingress outgress costs, right? that run across the cloud, right? So it's hard to say, but I mean, and then there's a fear of missing out. Like I don't have the fear of missing out on money or opportunity, but more so just I want to know so that I can put us in the direction, the path that we want to go. And so I will probably end up making a Web3. I don't want to do Web 3.0. I have to do it, because if I don't do it, who's going to go and try to map that up to like an ideal map and say direction? I'm not trying to make money with it. I'm trying to say, what's the utility here? How are we going to go down this path? How is it going to pair well with GreenOps? Because like one thing that Web 3.0 apparently can do is take the money out of the hands of the wrong people and put it on the right people, assuming that the people that are there are doing that, right? So I think those are the interesting things. And then it doesn't matter what path you are, the cloud is there, right? Like, and even like people coming from a developer, this is really hard to get people that are coming to tech to go straight into cloud. It's super hard because they come in, they're like, oh, I should learn HTML, JavaScript, CSS, React, Next.js. And you're just trying to like, just come into the cloud, right? Don't be a developer, be a cloud developer, because if you start there on day one, you're going to open the doors to so much stuff. And it's kind of like table stakes. It's just like, it just changes how everything is built, right? But it's really hard to get people over there. And so, even though, I'm working really hard to get people in the 100 days of cloud, like 100 days of code is like 10 times larger, but the opportunity is amazing for people, right? But they don't know. They go,
no, absolutely,
right?
100%. I love the way that you kind of describe that, almost that. Well, hang on a sec. When we do move into this Web 3.0 world, who is bringing it all together? Who is talking about what that might look like? So, I mean, look, Andrew, let's kind of round out this conversation with reflecting back to 100 Days of Cloud, and just let us know how that's going at the moment, and how can people get involved with that community?
So I think that at the 100 Days of Cloud, we started it about a year and a bit ago. Like you came in not too far after, but the way that came about was I used to have a technical writer, Christina. She now works at Dev as a developer advocate. And so she was writing content for me on my platform. I said, you know what, there's no reason for us, like we were making study notes. And I said, I don't really want to keep all this content to myself because there's no point in having a paywall on my platform and no one ever having access to it. We should put it out there. And if it makes more money, if people come over, that's fine. And so she started writing articles. And I said, let's just say 100 Days of Cloud and you go to it. And she just started writing articles on Deb. And so I was promoting it on Twitter. And then some people that were following me, because I did the AWS Certified Challenge, which was like a certification challenge at the time, which we did with Free Code Camp. And so, some of our members said, oh, this is like a challenge. And they started making their own articles and starting like day 1, day 2. And we weren't trying to make a community. I was just trying to get content out there. And then just kind of snowballed out of control. You know what I mean? And so, it just became kind of like organized and people were popping in saying, hey, let's go ahead and do that. It's been a bit dormant, but I think that we're going to see another resurge in our community. So, like the last year, we really learned just the interest there. And I think that, we're going to probably form something new with more members. And what I'm hoping is there's some way that people that contribute to 100 Days of Cloud, they're going to get something back. Not just the fact that they're going to help themselves, but something like monetary value or resource values. And that's what I'm trying to work towards. And so maybe Web3 with like a DAO, like a decentralized something organization, if we had a DAO for the 100 Days of Cloud, basically John, you could be a fractional owner of that organization, right? And it's not owned by one person. And we can all take that into a direction that's going to be powerful, but I have to solve Web 3.0 to know how to do that, right? And make sure that those tokens aren't unsecured securities, and everyone's going to have a tax problem at the end of the year. So, that's something that I'd like to see with the 100 Days of Cloud going. It took a long time to figure out what kind of platform was going to give us our reach. And I think that Twitter Spaces has been working out really well for us. Of course, we have the Discord. But it's really hard because it all runs. It's all run based on volunteer effort, right? Yeah. And it's really hard to get people to leave their own thing to say, "Hey, I know you're doing this own thing, and if you put that time into it, you're going to get your own thing out of it. But if you join this thing, it's going to be bigger than all of us, and it will take us in direction." And that's really hard to sell people on. So I think that we're going to see a resurgence here, and I have some interesting plans. 400 Days of Cloud that's coming up. So
that's cool. Yeah, keep us posted on those, Andrew. I'm sure. I think it certainly is. I when I speak to people of my own journey, I was one of those people that actually did a round. I did it at 1 to 100. I did the. I know Reshab and GPS were kind of in and around the scenes at the time, and kind of speaking to those guys in and out of the Discord. It certainly is one of those areas that I think if you treat it rightly and treat it as a challenge, it can open doors, if you actually work with it in the way and in more than just, like you say, gleaning knowledge. The ideas that you got there around, kind of earn as you learn, kind of the mentality, is such a cool way of looking at it, and especially feeding that into Web 3.0 is clearly, it's one of those learning opportunities, I guess, for us all, isn't it? In terms of, like you say, trying to figure out actually, do I need to build my own blockchain now? Do I need to get onto the Ethereum network? Do I, all those good things, which, okay, you can go and buy some crypto, but actually building your own and feeding that into your own thing is clearly a cool place to be, cool idea.
I think we can get people there, but we just have to not think so much about the technology, like, oh, we're using Ethereum, we're using this thing, but just like, here's a video tutorial, follow it, now you're in the door. Do you know what I mean? Like, here's our road into this, and instead of focusing on like what is the underpinnings of the technology, but just say like, just do these 5 steps, and now you're in the door, and let's get the business value, which is like, okay, I'm getting money back, or I feel that this actually is a community that is community owned, right? And that's the hardest part, right? Like when you do this thing, they say, who owns this thing? And I'm saying, well, it's community owned. They said, well, is that really true? Like, who holds the keys? And that's something that is very hard, but I think we've not seen what it looks like to have like a truly community owned organizations, and they're coming, and it's going to be really interesting, right? Assuming that regulations don't get in the way.
Yeah, no, I'm 100% with you, Andrew. This has been such a insightful is probably not the word. It's been a brilliant conversation. I've really loved having you on as a guest now today. I mean, look, before we wrap up this episode, I like to finish off with normally I have the question, what do you see coming over the next 5 to 10 years? But I think we've probably already talked about that to a certain extent. But I mean, have you got any last parting words that you think are wise to kind of leave our viewers with at this stage, Andrew?
Well, I think the thing is that people think that, as an individual, there's not much you can do on your own, but just look at like these tech giants, and there's one person that is driving those companies. So I don't think anyone should discount themselves as being a a factor of change, and you can absolutely do it. And it's only going to become more powerful as time goes on. So if you care about something, you need to start broadcasting that message, sending out that SOS to bring people in there. If you want to have that change, you can't just sit there and hope that somebody else is going to do it for you, right? And so, if you want to go in the direction of a greener world, a more open world where everyone fairly makes money for the effort that they have put in, and stuff like that, then you have to start broadcasting that and saying, how do we do this stuff, right? And maybe that community is your 100 Days of Cloud, or maybe you make your own community, but you just have to start saying that instead of saying, how do I just take care of myself? How do I take care of, everybody, right? How do I take care of the community together? So.
No, absolutely. We're ending this video on such a cool, positive outlook, Andrew. I can't thank you enough for being such an awesome guest. Before we go, can you let us all know how we can reach out to you, how we can get to ExamPro? We'll put all the links below. Do you want to let the viewers know how they can get hold of you, Andrew?
Cool. Yeah. If you're on Twitter, I'm Andrew Brown. I was very lucky to get that handle. On LinkedIn, I'm Andrew-WC-Brown. I don't usually tell people my initials because I found out in Europe that WC stands for water closet. But it does, but not over here. Not over here. But so that's just what it is. But people won't forget it, at least. Or if you're looking for me on Polywork, my username there is Andrew Brown as well. I have my own platform called ExamPro.co. If you're looking for 100 Days of Cloud, there's the 100daysofcloud.com where you can get to the Discord, see the blog content, things like that. But I'm not too hard to find. Just make a hashtag 100 Days of Cloud, and I'm sure I'll show up.
No, absolutely fantastic. Andrew, you've been an awesome guest. Thanks so much for giving up your time and coming to say hello to me. It's been brilliant.
Cool. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
See you soon. Thanks, Andrew.
Ciao.